You're listening to Behind the Quilts, a podcast that gives you a look behind the curtain at our vast quilting world. My name's Rona Herman. I'm an author, teacher, blogger, and pattern designer, best known as the Traveling Quilter from RonaTheRibbitter.com. Each month, I'm sitting down with quilting industry insiders to give you a one-of-a-kind look behind the quilts. Hi, Andi. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Rona. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. So before we begin, or I should say first thing out of the gate, for those that have never met you before, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I am Andi Stanfield, the owner of True Blue Quilts. I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, where I design and write my quilt patterns, teach in the local area. I've done a little bit of teaching outside of the local shops for some guilds, and Zoom, of course, has opened up everything. So it's been really fun to get to know quilters across the country and around the world.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay. So what got you into quilting? Like, when did you first start quilting?
Sure. My mother sewed all my clothes when I was a kid, but I never touched a sewing machine until I was an adult. I think we both knew that things would not go well if she tried to teach me to quilt, but I was crafty. My grandmother taught me to crochet. I did a lot of cross stitching as a kid. But then my mom's retirement hobby was to open a fabric and yarn store. So she lives close by, and I helped her through that whole entrepreneurial process. And of course, being in a room full of fabric, you just fall in love. And I fell down the rabbit hole fairly quickly, bought a long arm, started designing quilts, and then she closed her shop. I kept up with my quilting hobby and turned it into a business in 2015.
Oh, nice. So did it, when you first started in the quilting portion of it yourself, did you have the intention of maybe doing a business, or how did that transition happen?
It was fairly seamless, I guess, because kind of through the long arm side of things and teaching in the quilt shop, I started supplementing some of the patterns that we were getting in. Actually, it was the strip club when Jelly Roll packaging first came out, and Cozy Quilts has fabulous patterns for jelly rolls. And we started a strip club in the shop, and I would get patterns from Cozy Quilts, but obviously a full quilt takes a little while to put together. So on alternate months, I developed smaller projects for the club to sew. And so that kind of got me into the design aspect. And I just had the example from my mom opening the shop to the friends that I developed that mentored me with the long arm side of things. It naturally evolved over the years.
So would you say, or do you still do long arming for people?
I do. There are some long armers who quilt and get quilts mailed to them, but I prefer to work with local customers who I can talk to face to face. It's so fun to deliver a quilt and have that, opening of the package kind of Christmas morning feeling.
Oh yeah.
As you look at the quilt and, get to ooh and ah over all the fun details.
So I saw on your website, do you still do commissioned projects, or is that something that you used to do? What type of projects?
Occasionally people will learn that I am a quilter and they will have, the one-off kind of things. They don't sew themselves, but they have a treasured memory of a quilt from grandma, and they want to, perhaps incorporate this bit of fabric for a new baby quilt. Or I had a neighbor of my in-laws wanted a wedding quilt done for their child. So small projects like that, but I'm always open to design collaboration. And if that turns into a need for me to do the quilting, then I'm happy to do that as well.
Awesome. When did you start actually publishing your patterns? Because you talked about doing the pattern writing and stuff through your teaching. When did that all start for the actual pattern business side of it?
I think I published my first patterns on Etsy around 2015, when I jumped through all the hoops in my local area to become an actual business. And 2015 was when my mother and I got this crazy idea to write a book together. And so that self-publishing journey started around that same time.
So just as an aside, because I self-publish my stuff as well. What made you decide to do the self-publishing instead of going with, say, an actual publisher?
Yeah, we actually, it was the time frame that, going through the whole pitch process of trying to find an editor to work with, which publishing company would accept your work. And then, it's a long process to put together 10 to 12 projects. And then to add a year or two on top of that to find a publisher and work with them. We just decided it was going to be easier and faster to get things out on our own.
Right. So you mentioned a book with your mom, and that was the Monochromatic. What's the name of the book?
My mother and I wrote Monochromatic Quilts, Amazing Variety together. And one of the quilts is pictured behind me. It's really funny. You'll see a very distinct mix of quilts in the book. I tend to design a little more simplified piecing, 2.5-inch strips. As I said, the strip club has been a lifelong passion of mine. And my mom loves applique, and we both enjoy paper piecing. So there's a lot of crossover of techniques, but we do have distinct styles that you can discover as you page through the book.
Nice. So for those that are not aware yet, what exactly is monochromatic quilting?
Well, monochromatic is fairly easy broken down into the phrase one color. So they are one color quilts. I will admit that they tend to be one color plus background. So I give myself a little leeway there. But I don't use just one fabric. So that is really the key to making a dynamic design and getting that gradient feel that really makes quilts glow and draws the viewer, the person cuddling with the fabric. It draws them in and keeps them looking at the design, because different areas pop out depending on the level of contrast in your fabrics.
Awesome. So when somebody wants to do a monochromatic quilt, what kind of fabrics, like what kind of different types of fabrics would you suggest they look for?
I personally go for a mix of small scale prints. Obviously, with monochromatic, you'll probably lean into tone on tone, because you want the single color on each fabric to come through. And if you go for some of those bigger, bolder, more graphic fabrics, they're going to have more colors, and that isn't necessarily bad. But if you're working with the idea of monochromatic, sticking to one color family, then you want to limit those multicolor prints in your design. Right. So that's my general design philosophy, is I pick a color family to work with. And as the true blue quilter, you can guess my go-to color palette is those shades of blue. And then I try to just get that range from light to dark and really focus on those medium shades, those transitions between those really clear-cut lights and darks, because that's where all the interesting fun happens, is in those transition and those medium shades.
You know, it's funny. I have made a monochromatic quilt, but at the time I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And it wasn't until I met you and started looking at your monochromatic quilting and went, oh my gosh, I did that. It was a quilt. I called it 40 shades. And so the entire quilt was all different shades of green, the entire thing. And then a background of gray. So it like a light gray. So it's kind of funny how sometimes you'll actually make one without even realizing that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really a fun experiment. And I was going back over just some different influences. And it was about 10 years ago that the big red and white quilt exhibit was put on display. And that's a wonderful example of how, monochromatic is not boring at all. You can work with a very limited palette and get really, really gorgeous results.
Oh yeah. And especially when it's just one color, like you said, with the background, it really allows that color to take the stage and really shine, which I love about that. So what actually drew you originally to doing the monochromatic quilting?
It was honestly a kind of a marketing exercise. We were looking at the various topics out there because my mom and I both kind of wanted to grow our influence in the quilting world. And we looked around and said, you know what, there's always discussion of color, but no one's really addressing monochromatic. And it's become a lot more popular over the last few years, but it's really been a fun exercise, and there's always more room to explore and take some of those traditional patterns and reimagine them in these different color palettes.
Oh, definitely. And you talked about in the book how you and your mom each do different types, different techniques. Is there one technique that you might say would showcase the fabrics more over the others, or are they kind of equal footing there?
I think they all have a place. That's the beauty of the quilting world, is that there is such a wide variety of techniques, and there's a lot of crossover. Everybody starts with the same tools of fabric and thread, and we can just go in so many different directions. So you can see the monochromatic play out in traditional designs, all those classic quilt blocks, churn dash, pinwheels, all sorts of variations. And then you can get really intricate with paper piecing designs. You can do a lot with applique. It runs the full spectrum.
Awesome. So do you teach monochromatic quilting?
I do. That's actually one of my most popular trunk shows, is the quilts from the Monochromatic Quilts Amazing Variety book. And I could take some of those more popular patterns from the book and teach them. Purple Angles is a great beginner friendly paper piecing pattern. And then I've used Yellow Sun's pattern, is a very simple block, but you really get to dive into the mix of colors and how to bring out that contrast with that pattern.
Very nice. So are there other classes that you teach as well besides the monochromatic patterns?
Yes, again, another partnership with my mom. She's a great inspiration. We enjoy working with the angle play templates, and we've developed a series of patterns and actually wrote a second book called Angle Play the Easy Way to give people a little more variety with that technique, because there was just one designer. The developer of the original templates, Margaret Miller, had published several books, but there's always room for another one. So we enjoy playing with that. And we actually meld a lot of the design elements from monochromatic using these half rectangle triangle templates in new and interesting ways. So
yeah,
more time to play.
I definitely love the angle play stuff. I haven't gotten to work with it as much as I'd like, but yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. So I noticed that some of the classes you have listed coming up is at your local quilt shop.
Yes.
Do you teach at guilds and things like that, just besides quilt shops?
Yes, I am open to just about anything we can. If people are interested, we can certainly discuss a wide variety of options. I really enjoy attending and having the opportunity to teach at quilt retreats. So that's a fun option if there are several people that want to work on the same pattern. And as I said, the Zoom option gives guilds a really great way to get a wide variety of teachers from different areas where we don't have to travel. You know, you have all the class supplies you need at your fingertips if you're working in your home studio. And it's just a great way to try something new.
Awesome. So this is I am the traveling quilter, and of course my blog and the community is everything about traveling quilting. So have you done a lot of travel in your life, or any travel?
Yeah, actually, I am the True Blue part of my business name actually ties back to my days in the Air Force. I grew up as a military kid, so I moved around a lot, and then I continued by serving in the Air Force for a few years myself. So yes, I have moved quite a bit. Not in the last 20 years. I've actually stayed in one place, but in my youth, I was all over the United States, and I have traveled outside the country, mostly for vacations. But yeah, I've definitely got the travel bug.
So I got to ask, what out of all the places that you've been, either for personal reasons or the Air Force or even quilting world, what's your favorite place that you've been to so far?
I definitely would go back in a heartbeat to Scotland. That just family ties, family heritage. It just is fascinating area. But I can't say I've hated anywhere. So the world is a wonderful, beautiful place.
Oh, I agree. And you learn so much at every different place because they're all so unique and fun in Scotland. So I've been to Ireland. I have not been to Scotland yet, but it is on the list. There's a specific show idea I can't talk about yet, but I'm almost afraid to go to Scotland because
Do you want me to leave?
well, that too, but also because of the yarn, because that's where Kay Fassett decided to learn how to crochet and knit. And I really want to learn to crochet, but I know that if I do, my fabric collection is going to triple with yarn. So yes. I'm almost afraid that I'm going to come back and my husband's going to be a little frightened that I have an extra suitcase full of yarn. So
yeah, I know. I've with the yarn habit, I've started a shawl obsession kind of, but I give myself one yearly project because I don't knit very often, but it is a nice activity that you can do, you know, in the evenings in front of the TV with family around. Whereas if I'm sewing, I'm up in a far corner of the house and I feel kind of isolated. So they very complementary hobbies.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you've ever seen, I saw one recently. It was a block that was a quilt block, but then they had stitched yarn around it. So like the yarn was the sashing, which was absolutely, I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I've seen the blankets with the crochet edging. And obviously the designs go back and forth between the yarn world and the quilt world. I'm thinking specifically of granny squares, but there's a lot of other motifs that make the translation as well. But yeah, it would be interesting to do wider crochet or knit, as you said, sashing. That would be an interesting look for a textile.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. So okay, so projects with your mom. I'm actually curious, does she come with you for when you teach? Or do you do like
Uh,
joint trunk shows or anything like that?
we've done joint trunk shows in a while. She has backed off a lot of her teaching opportunities and travel opportunities. Just, as parents age, they tend to stay closer to home. So she's not doing as much of that currently, but we have in the past. Yeah, it's always fun. I'm very, very blessed to have a wonderful relationship with her and have both her and my dad close by.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that, yeah, that you get to work with her and have so much fun and such an amazing hobby. So are there anything in the works for coming books, new books or patterns?
I'm always working on new patterns. It's just a factor of never enough time in the day. I guess I'm really part of that sandwich generation now with aging parents, and my daughter's still in high school. So I still have the mom responsibilities at home that cut into the time I have to churn out those patterns. But I'm designing lots of new projects. The last couple of years, I've been very lucky to work with Island Batik as a brand ambassador. And so it's just lots and lots of fun to work with their fabric collections and come up with new designs. Some monochromatic, some not so much, but
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the batiks because that would be interesting to do a monochromatic in all batiks because they're so they're so unique in the style. Obviously, have you done batik monochromatic?
yes, actually, earlier this year, Island Batik promoted their gradients. They have a selection of fabrics called their foundations line that are always available versus the collections that come out seasonally. So with the foundations, all the different ambassadors got different colorways. And so we all created some monochromatic designs, and I reinterpreted my yellow suns pattern with greens, and it was luscious and wonderful. But for those doubters out there that haven't tried batiks and are afraid of mixing them, I throw batiks in with my regular quilting cottons all the time. It works just fine. And to tie back to your dreams of a trip to Scotland and seeing all the Cafe influences, every quilt definitely needs a little bit of Cafe facet.
Oh, I 100% agree. I'm in trouble whenever I walk into a quilt shop that has, a wall of Cafe facet. It's kind of an obsession at this point, but that's okay. We all have I think most quilters border on obsession level.
Of course, it's called an addiction for good reason.
Yes, but there are worse addictions to have.
Very true. There's documented health benefits of quilting. So
absolutely. In fact, that's next month. That's our topic is we're delving into health and quilting. So so for anybody that wants to hire you, bring you to their guild or do a Zoom meeting, where can they find you?
I would love to invite all your listeners to head over to truebluequilts.com/monochromatic, and that dives a little bit deeper into what we've talked about today with monochromatic quilting. And you will find my newsletter sign up and a contact form on truebluequilts.com if you want to get in touch with me, dive more into the world of monochromatic quilts, angle play, batiks. It's very hard to limit yourself to one aspect of quilting since there's so much to love.
Absolutely. So I always ask everyone just for fun question. So we did talk a little bit about knitting, but is there any other hobbies that you have or something that maybe people don't know that you do besides quilting?
Oh gosh. I am an avid reader and have dabbled a little bit with the NaNoWriMo challenge for writing a novel. So
Wow.
yeah, I always thought as a kid, I'm like, I'd love to write a book. So it's a little, I dabbled in it a little bit with the quilt patterns, but fiction it's something I'd love to be able to do. I just have a hard time like getting through the story and wrapping it up. So
Right.
I'm in awe. And I've been really interested in our fellow quilters who have juggled both the fiction writing with their quilting talents as well.
Oh, yeah, because I never knew that you could weave quilting into a fiction novel. And some of the ladies that we see out there, well, and men that, I mean, have done a beautiful job in multiple books. There's series of quilting books, fiction, that in fact, one of my favorites is based in Scotland. So I'm full circle on that one. But yeah, that was really all the questions I had. Great. So is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or share?
I'm just interested in seeing where your travels take you next. It's so fun to imagine that life on the road. I know there's definitely a downside, but I'm glad you get to have such adventures.
I do have a home base in North Carolina, but I like right now I'm in Nevada, and then we'll be leaving right after the quilt show Reno and heading back to North Carolina on my annual cross country trip. But this time going up to Minneapolis. So yeah, we'll go to the St. Cloud show and then down to Iowa for the all Iowa shop hop.
Yep. Fun. Yeah, that was part of my childhood Air Force adventures. Was we lived in Las Vegas, and then we went to the East Coast, Pennsylvania and Virginia, and then headed back out here to Arizona.
Yeah. So you've been all across as well. And it's funny because as a kid, I didn't travel, but as an adult, now I'm doing all the travel. I think I did it in reverse.
Yep. My husband tricked out a minivan. So we're ready for the empty nest travel years here in a little bit. But
oh, that'll be so where would let me try that again. Where would you want to go? Do you have a destinations in mind?
I would love to be one of the people that hits all 50 states, not in a continuous loop, although I have seen some maps that show it can be done. But yeah, being able to, take several treks across the country would be fun. And, national parks are a great national treasure. So I'd love to visit more of those and just visit see the world.
Yeah. Well, are there any like quilt shows or any kind of quilting bucket list items that you want to check off or have already?
No, well, when my mom's shop was open, we did get to go to Houston for the market portion. So I've never stayed for the actual festival and done that tourist part of it. So that would be fun. And Paducah, of course. Is it an AQS quilt week up in Pennsylvania? It would be fun to get back up there, which I haven't done since my high school days. But yeah, the big shows in Japan, in Europe, I want to see it all.
Oh yeah, those are definitely on my list. All of the international shows, because there's so many that was one of the first things that I learned when I started the traveling piece of it, is how many quilters there are around the world, not just here in the US. I mean, and not just in Europe either, because they're literally all over the world. There's 2 shows in France. There's one in Germany. In, like you said, Japan. They're all over. I was honestly shocked.
Yeah, I bet. Very eye-opening when you get beyond your own small world.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Rona, and safe travels as you head back to the East.
Thank you. And you too, when you can finally get out on the road.
Awesome. Thanks.
You've been listening to Behind the Quilts with my special guest, Andi Stanfield from True Blue Quilts. If you enjoyed our visit, be sure to hit that subscribe button to be notified every time a new episode is posted. Until next time, as always, my friends, happy quilting.